Hello everyone, my name's Reevesy, this is Week of Geek, and today I want to speak to you about Baldur's Gate 3. Specifically, I want to answer the question, what actually is Baldur's Gate 3? Okay, so to answer the question, I want to look into Baldur's Gate and the history of the franchise. I want to look a little bit into Dungeons and Dragons, the world that it's set in, and the tabletop game itself. And I would also like to look into Larian Studios, the creators of the game, and some of their past work. Just to be really clear, this video is not a review, and I'm not going to tell you about the good things of the game or the bad things of the game. That's coming up. This is just to give you an understanding of what is Baldur's Gate 3, where's it come from, and why is it such a big deal. I am absolutely stuffed up, like full of cold, so I'm sorry if any of that leaks out through the video, but I still wanted to speak to you about this game. I've put in a lot of time. So very quickly then, here at Week of Geek, we like to review games, answer questions about games, and put it all together into a nice series. So we'll always cover one game with at least 4 or 5 questions, answering quite a few things which we think you might want answering. So if you like the sound of that, please make sure you click subscribe. Check out our other playlists with our other series in. We've covered some stuff on New World and Star Citizen, and we've got lots more games coming. We've also covered Genshin if you're interested in that. So yeah, please check it out. If it's something that you like, subscribe. I also get that you've probably not got all the time in the world, so if you need to skip ahead and skip all of the explanation about all of the history of Baldur's Gate, then please feel free to click on the little link in the description which says TLDR. It'll skip you right to the conclusion where I'll summarise all of the points for you. Okay, so Baldur's Gate, the original game. Let's talk about that first. Let's talk about the franchise as a whole and why this Baldur's Gate game is such a big deal on its own merit with that title. Baldur's Gate 1 was originally brought out on PC. If you remember the game, then you probably remember it being one of the best RPGs for its time on PC, paving the way for a lot of other games to come after it, ones that you might know now and titles which you might be very familiar with. Baldur's Gate 1 was the first game to make a hybrid transition between the classic turn-based combat of RPGs into this mixed, almost action combat, a bit like what you see in Diablo now. It was the first to kind of bridge the gap between those two worlds. So it was quite a huge deal. In the original game, you kind of had the choice to put in pauses to act as a turn-based game or not, to kind of run it as a bit more of an action combat. And it had loads and loads of story and lore to get into, so it really had the best of both worlds, that old RPG world and what we probably know now as the action RPG. But the reason why I wanted to talk about that transition specifically, because the new game, Baldur's Gate 3, is turn-based. It's a very old retro style of RPG. For me, I just found it very interesting that the first Baldur's Gate was one of the first to bridge the gap between turn-based RPGs and action RPGs, and now the third one is going right back to the original days of turn-based. You might also know a game called Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance. I want to separate Baldur's Gate 1, 2 and 3 and the Dark Alliance series, because Dark Alliance is purely action combat. It's a game where they've removed most of the dialogue and story and just focused on the combat. And I'm not sure the first one was actually that well received, looking back on reviews and what people said, but I remember it on PlayStation 2 being a great game and spent lots of hours in it. So Baldur's Gate 1 made a huge name for itself. Baldur's Gate 2 went further with the mix to action combat and helped pave the way for games that you might really love now, like Torchlight and Diablo. I probably should have started with Diablo, it's probably the most famous, but with those action combat isometric games. All of that to me says that this franchise has a massive history in RPGs, and of course it does, it absolutely does. But this game is very different. Baldur's Gate 3 is very different from 1 and 2. So I'm not sure people who originally loved 1 and 2 are going to be guaranteed to love Baldur's Gate 3. Which brings me on to my next point. Dungeons and Dragons. Dungeons and Dragons is a tabletop RPG. And that means that although you might have some counters and some mats and some drawings, most of the gameplay and RPG is done up here in your head. And you've got one person controlling the table and narrating the flow and story back to you. It's all done without the aid of pixels. So Dungeons and Dragons is probably the most famous tabletop RPG, but there is obviously loads of others. But because of the popularity of this game, and especially in the last 5 years where it's really taken off with the 5th edition, you now have a lot of people and a lot of fans of this game and this iteration of Dungeons and Dragons looking towards a computer version for answers to what they've got in their head as the perfect RPG, right? So I'm not going to go too much into the history of Dungeons and Dragons or much more into Baldur's Gate, but all you need to know is Dungeons and Dragons is in the 5th version of the rules. You might have heard of it referred to as 5e. That's the number of the rules. That's the rule set. That's the model that we're currently working with in tabletop gaming now. There is no other computer game which has tried to take on the 5e rules. So again, you've got a massive group of people who are really looking forward to a computer version of their much loved tabletop game. And you've probably got a lot of people inside that bracket, much like myself, who were brought up on video games and didn't ever delve into the world of tabletop gaming until the last 5 years. Again, like I have. And they have this expectation of what a game on the computer would look like if you was to introduce these magical set of rules in this world that we've been playing on tabletop. Hopefully you're starting to get the picture that I'm trying to lay out here. There's two massive worlds colliding in this game, and this game needs to meet the expectations of a massive set of fans, and that burden or honor, whichever way you'd like to look at it, has fallen to the games producer and developer Larian Studios. Now, if you are into computer games, specifically you like Steam, then there's a chance you've probably heard of these people because they created the games Divinity Original Sin 1 and 2, which is a turn-based RPG. It's still one of the most popular games on Steam, with overwhelmingly positive reviews, and everybody who's played it has loved something about it. My explanation of Divinity Original Sin 2 was as close to Dungeons and Dragons tabletop gaming as you will get on a computer when I tried to talk to my friends about it. That was my explanation of that game that Larian Studios produced. So you might understand how overwhelmingly excited I and millions of other people were when Larian Studios stepped forward and said, we want to put Dungeons and Dragons into the video game world. And I mean, look, they've got loads of experience in this sort of turn-based classic tabletop style of video game. So it's really good, right? That's really good news. Yeah, so it should be really good, and I think a lot of people think it really is. I'm not going to talk to you too much about my impressions and opinions because that could take a while, and that's another video. But the point of all of that I've just covered is I just want you to appreciate Baldur's Gate 3 is more than just an extra title or a sequel to a previous game. So to go back to the question and answer it, what actually is Baldur's Gate 3? Baldur's Gate 3 is a turn-based RPG which will be trying to cater to many different audiences. The fans of Baldur's Gate, the fans of Dungeons and Dragons, the fans of video games, the fans of classic turn-based RPGs, the fans of Divinity Original Sin 1 and 2. I mean, I know I said I was a bit ill, but listing all those things made me go a little bit lightheaded. But you get the picture, right? There's lots of stuff riding on this game and a lot of people who want to love this game for their own individual reasons. It's not just because they like Baldur's Gate, or it's not just because they like video games or Dungeons and Dragons. Larian Studios have this opportunity to unite all of these people. So for those of you who have watched and those of you who skipped to the end, Baldur's Gate 3 is a turn-based RPG, very much akin to the classic RPGs before action combat. You can do many different things, and everything that you do in the game has a butterfly effect. The whole world and rules and how the game runs is all based around the latest iteration of Dungeons and Dragons, the tabletop game, which is Dungeons and Dragons 5e. So if you like, this is a computer-based version of everything that you would expect from Dungeons and Dragons 5e, just on your computer in a game. That's the best way I can kind of try and describe it and get my head around it. But there is so much more to it, so make sure you stick around and subscribe so you can see the rest of the things that we're going to cover on this game. Thank you very much for watching. Like I said, my name's been Reevesy and you've been watching Week of Geek, and thanks for putting up with my cold and my disgustingness, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.